A Florida deputy was sipping coffee in his cruiser when a dead man walked out of the dark. The intersection was completely empty. Then a figure stumbled into the harsh fluorescent glare of the gas station streetlights. The man was barefoot, his clothes were drenched, and as he limped closer, the deputy realized the man wasn't just wet, he was soaked in blood. His face was a swollen, beaten mass of shattered bone, but the true nightmare was his neck. His throat had been sliced wide open. It was a deep, jagged canyon that stretched from ear to ear, nearly severing his windpipe entirely. By every law of human biology, this man's body was actively shutting down. He shouldn't be breathing. He certainly shouldn't be walking. But 25-year-old Saul Lopez had dragged himself out of a watery grave for one specific reason. He had a story to tell. A story of a brutal betrayal, a 50-foot plunge into freezing black water, and a woman who called herself crazy. Saul's miraculous survival wasn't just going to solve his own attempted murder. It was about to expose a secret so incredibly dark, seasoned detectives almost couldn't comprehend it. His nightmare didn't start in a dark alley. It started with a single, seemingly innocent notification on his phone. 2 days earlier, Saul received a Facebook friend request. The profile name was Crazy Fonza. Her real name was Natalie Fonza. She messaged Saul saying she was hungry. She asked if he would buy her a pizza. Saul, trying to be a gentleman, offered to take her out for tacos instead. They met up. They ate. They talked. To Saul, it felt like a completely normal, innocent encounter. But in the dark psychology of violent crime, this wasn't a date. It was a behavioral interview. Natalie was quietly analyzing him. Was he generous? Was he agreeable? Was he a soft target? The very next day, she sprang the trap. Natalie asked him to come over to a house on Oak Forest Drive. Saul had just cashed his paycheck, so he agreed. When he arrived, Natalie told him she needed to pick up her cat from a friend's house. But she made a strange request. She insisted on driving his silver Honda Odyssey, claiming he wouldn't know the way. Behavioral analysts call this a compliance test. By handing over his keys, Saul unknowingly surrendered total control of his only escape route. Natalie drove to a second location and parked in the dark. She went inside to get the cat. Saul waited patiently in the passenger seat. But when the front door opened, Natalie wasn't holding an animal. She was standing next to a 31-year-old man named Nafis Reynolds. And Nafis was holding a gun. The air inside the van changed instantly. Nafis climbed into the back seat, pressing the heavy barrel of the firearm into Saul's face. Natalie got back behind the wheel. In the blink of an eye, Saul had become a hostage in his own vehicle. But they didn't rob him right away. Instead, they employed a chilling, sadistic psychological game. Natalie casually announced they were going to stop at a family cookout. And bizarrely, they did. They pulled up to a crowded gathering. There was music playing, people were eating hamburgers, they were laughing and drinking. Saul was forced to sit there, surrounded by people who could easily save him. It's called the trauma freeze response. He was utterly paralyzed by the unseen threat of the gun pressing against his ribs. It was a twisted form of psychological torture. They were giving him false hope. They were keeping him docile. But as soon as they left the party and drove back out into the pitch-black night, the game abruptly ended. The van went dead silent. Then, without a single word of warning, Nafis raised the heavy metal frame of the pistol and brought it down violently on Saul's face. Bone cracked. Saul's jaw shattered. Blood sprayed across the dashboard. Through the sheer, blinding chaos of the beating, Natalie didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She just kept her eyes deadlocked on the road. She leaned over to the man who had bought her dinner just 24 hours before, and she delivered a sentence that would echo in Saul's mind forever. "This is the night you're going to die." Natalie pulled the van onto a secluded ridge spanning the Escambia River. Below them was a terrifying 50-foot drop into a swirling, pitch-black current. They dragged Saul's battered body out of the passenger seat. He was disoriented, dizzy, and choking on his own blood. Natalie grabbed him tightly by the hair. She violently pulled his head back, exposing his neck to the pale moonlight. Nafis stepped forward with a blade. He didn't just cut, he sawed. 3 distinct, brutal passes deep across Saul's throat. They were making absolutely sure he wouldn't be able to scream on the way down. Then they hoisted his limp body over the railing. 50 feet of empty air. The impact with the freezing river felt like hitting solid concrete. Up on the bridge, Natalie and Nafis peered over the edge. Seeing nothing but bubbles sinking into the absolute darkness, they climbed back into the van. They drove 20 miles south. They took his phone, his cash, and his shoes. Then they set his van on fire to destroy the evidence. They went home, took warm showers, and went to sleep. They thought they had committed the perfect murder, but they failed to account for the single most powerful force in nature, the human will to live. The freezing water didn't kill Saul, it created a medical miracle. The icy temperature rapidly constricted his blood vessels, acting like an invisible tourniquet that drastically slowed the fatal bleeding from his severed neck. Running on pure, primal adrenaline, Saul broke the surface. He swam through the black water, dragged his broken body onto a muddy bank, and literally held his own throat together with his bare hands. He waited in freezing agony for the sun to come up. He flagged down a passing boat, reached the shore, and walked until he found that deputy at the gas station. Saul was rushed into emergency surgery as a level 1 trauma alert. Saul used a tablet to guide Detective Martinez exactly to the house on Oak Forest Drive. Police dug into the address and quickly identified Natalie and Nafis. But the killers were still out there and the clock was ticking. Then a cinematic stroke of pure luck broke the case wide open. Detectives were standing inside a local Circle K reviewing the security footage of Saul and Natalie's taco date. Suddenly, the front door chime rang out. Walking into the exact same store, right past the detectives, were Natalie and Nafis. Police quietly followed them out to the parking lot, secured a warrant, and brought them straight into the interrogation room. The detectives thought they had this case wrapped up in a bow, but they were about to realize they were investigating the wrong crime. Detective Martinez sat across the table from Natalie. He kept his tone casual, asking her about the Spanish-speaking man she had recently picked up at the store. Natalie leaned back in her chair, surprisingly relaxed. She shrugged her shoulders and she just started confessing. She detailed how she lured the man to the house, how Nafis pulled a gun, how they robbed him and took his backpack. But as she spoke, Detective Martinez felt a cold chill run down his spine. The timeline she was giving was completely wrong. The details didn't match Saul's story at all. He held up his hand and stopped her. "Natalie," he said quietly, "I'm talking about the man whose throat you cut, the one you threw off the bridge." Natalie froze. The arrogant smirk completely melted off her face. She slumped back into her chair, her eyes went wide, and she whispered, "Oh, I thought he died." In that horrifying fraction of a second, the detective realized the devastating truth. Natalie wasn't confessing to Saul's attack. She was confessing to a completely different crime. Just 9 days after leaving Saul for dead in the freezing river, Natalie and Nafis had run the exact same honey trap. They had lured another innocent man, Mr. Sanchez, to the house and robbed him at gunpoint. When police arrested them at the Circle K, they were literally carrying Mr. Sanchez's stolen backpack. Natalie had targeted so many victims, she literally couldn't keep her violent crimes straight. Faced with an overwhelming mountain of evidence, both Natalie and Nafis were forced to take plea deals. But the September 2025 sentencing hearing proved that monsters rarely see themselves in the mirror. Standing before the judge, facing 30 years in prison, Natalie read a prepared letter. She didn't offer a single tear of remorse for the innocent men she terrorized. Instead, she claimed she was the real victim. She blamed Nafis for manipulating her. She told the judge Nafis had poisoned her mind with rainbows and unicorns, and she audaciously complained that her freedom was simply being paused. The prosecutor dismantled her illusion with rapid-fire questions. He asked her if she called 911 after they threw Saul off the bridge. She looked down and said no. He asked if she willingly went home, took a shower, and slept peacefully. She said yes. He asked if she willingly lured another man to his doom just 9 days later. She had absolutely no defense. The judge looked at the horrific medical photos of Saul's severed neck. She handed down the absolute maximum sentence allowed under the plea, 30 years in state prison for both of them. Saul Lopez sat quietly in the gallery. He watched the woman who marked him for death and the man who wielded the knife get chained up and led away in handcuffs. We don't know the full extent of the physical and psychological scars Saul carries with him today. Trauma like that doesn't just wash away in the river current. But we do know this. Natalie and Nafis thought they were apex predators playing a sick game they couldn't possibly lose. They thought they had successfully erased Saul from the face of the earth. Instead, they chose the one man whose will to live was stronger than their desire to kill. Saul Lopez refused to die, and because he kept breathing, 2 violent predators will spend the next 3 decades locked inside a steel cage. It is a story of impossible survival, and a chilling reminder that the deadliest traps don't always happen in dark alleys. Sometimes they begin with a simple tap on a screen, a notification, a friend request, and a girl who calls herself crazy.